Everybody knows that druids and clerics are support classes, right? Right? Well, I mean, sure, they make fantastic supports, but what if I told you that combining them could also create the hardest hitting multi-target damage dealer that I have ever built? Would you believe me? You probably would. Welcome to D4 anyways. Hey everybody, so here at D4, each week I take a deep dive into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the definitive right way to play this character or anything, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something you're thinking about playing, or if you just really enjoy theorycraft or are looking for some nice D&D themed ASMR, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name's Colby. Right, so today I am going to try and build around two things specifically that I really loved when they were in the 1D&D playtest, but that have since gotten fairly significantly nerfed. I'm talking about the new Circle of the Sea Druid subclass and the updated, and yes, improved, it is, people, Conjure Animals spell. The nerfs that they got from 1D&D until release, though, left kind of a sour taste in my mouth, and as such, I've avoided both of them. But after giving it some thought and playing around with them a bit, I think I'm coming around on the idea that they still might be pretty dang good. So today, I'm going to test that theory and make a pretty solid multi-target damage dealer. But before we get into it, I think I want to take a minute to talk about the number of combat encounters most of us tend to have at our tables in a given adventuring day and how that might differ from what Wizards of the Coast expects us to be having and how it impacts the power discrepancy between spellcasters and non-spellcasters in D&D 5e, because it's going to have some import on the build today. So I want to kind of lay it all out before we get into the build. So, based on polls that I've done and a lot of stuff that I've read online and the way things often go at tables that I have played at, it seems like the vast majority of tables, or at least the vast majority of tables for those of you who watch my channel regularly and respond to polls that I post, for most of you, you're having one, maybe two combat encounters per long rest on an average adventuring day. Largely for that reason, when I've done character builds that are supposed to be good at sustained damage, my minimum threshold for being able to call the damage sustained is that it be sustainable for at least one combat encounter, with the caveat that, hey, if you're having more than one combat encounter per day regularly, then you'll want to lower your expectations oftentimes. But is that the expectation that Wizards of the Coast has for how we play D&D? Is the game and its various abilities, features, and perhaps more importantly, are the classes and subclasses balanced around one, maybe two combat encounters per day? In the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, WotC gave a recommendation for a number of encounters per adventuring day. For a variety of reasons, I'm sure it was a lot more than most of us seem to be having. Now, for a variety of reasons, I'm sure, they decided not to do that for the 2024 DMG, but I feel pretty confident that their intent was for us to usually be having more than one combat encounter per day, maybe unless that encounter was really, really challenging. When we don't do that at our tables and instead just give one combat encounter per day, even like the kind of hard encounter as defined by the new encounter builder with its XP budget and the new DMG, right? Most groups of players aren't going to be super challenged if they have lots of powerful resources that, say, reset on a long rest, which they can just expend to their heart's content, right? This, I think, is one of the biggest reasons that we see such a huge discrepancy in the power levels between spellcasters and non-spellcasters. As everyone knows, casting spells is one of the most powerful things that a character can do in D&D. That power of spells, however, is meant, I think, to be tempered by the fact that we tend to have a very limited number of times we can cast a spell in a day, at least our most powerful ones, right, for whatever our given level is. I think that the intent of the designers is that, sure, martial, like non-caster characters might not have the extreme levels of power available to spellcasters, but hey, they require fewer limited resources to achieve their potential, and so over the course of an adventuring day where you're maybe having 3 to 5 or more combat encounters, The differences in power between casters and non-casters kind of evens out, right? Where a caster might be able to do something really cool and flashy once in a while, but on their other turns, they're maybe a little less impressive than a consistently hard-hitting non-caster. Does this mean that I'm going to start changing the way I crunch numbers in my builds? No. Because again, my goal with these builds is both to explore what's possible with a character, but also to sort of build for the way that I think most of you tend to play at your table. If I start to get a sense that most tables are shifting in their playstyle and having encounters more frequently between long rests, I might, but I'm perfectly comfortable showing numbers for a build and trusting that you all are smart enough to make adjustments to what's advertised based on how things tend to go at your table. You guys all have an 18 intelligence or higher. I know that. In fact, I kind of wanted to say all of this to sort of explore what things might look like if I went in the opposite direction. I mean, I've talked a lot about how burst damage has largely been nerfed in the 2024 rules, right? Pallies can only smite once per turn and have to use their bonus action. No more auto crits for assassins, no more using action surge to cast a second fireball on your turn. And the recent Unearthed Arcana has Grave Clerics no longer giving vulnerability to an attack, which guaranteed double damage. So it seems like WotC is kind of committed to this, nerf of burst damage and plan on continuing it. That said, as I've adjusted the way that I calculate for sustained damage, taking an average of the damage we could do over a 4-round combat encounter, it's made me think maybe I should be using my spell slots even more. I often will do things like make calculations assuming we're using a luck point every round, though we have a limited number of those, right? Or a Fire Goliath's bonus damage, or maybe just our best spell slot for a really powerful concentration spell, etc., etc. But I mean, if we're a level 9 full caster with a bunch of 3rd, 4th, and 5th level spell slots, why not see what would happen over 4 rounds if we, say, cast Fireball every round, right? If most of us are truly only having one combat encounter per day most of the time, and I'm using up my other resources and calling it sustainable, why not take the gloves off? Maybe if nothing else, this will show how potentially bad for class balance only having 1 or 2 combat encounters per day can really be. Or heck, maybe I'm wrong and it won't actually be as powerful as I think, and it will help us all calm down a bit about the perceived power discrepancy between casters and marshals. I'm not saying I'm going to do this for every single build going forward, but I think in the name of science, it's what I'm going to do for the build today. Especially since I think the Druid of the Sea, who's focused on the Conjure Animals spell, can really excel at multi-target damage. So let's go all in on building for multi-target damage in other ways, blowing our spell slots and just see what we might be capable of damage-wise over the course of a once per day 4-round combat encounter, shall we? Come on, it'll be fun. Okay, I proudly present D&D episode number 215, the Tempestuous Sea, Hydromancer, the Warden of the Waves, the Depth Charger, the Shaman of the Sea, the Tempest's Warden, Neptune's Revenge, Sharknado! Oh man, Discord members, you guys get better every single week with these. Seriously, I think my favorite by a hair for this week, though, was the suggestion from Nancy Williams, the Maelstromancer. Yeah, that's got a good ring to it. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week, and man, I love this one. I love like the setting, being in the water with like the little piranhas or baby sharks and like the lightning coming off and like the bandana, right, going over one eye. Totally piratey looking. Awesome. Love it. If you'd be interested in following Randall to check out the other stuff that he does, or to maybe try and commission him to create some art for your character, maybe your entire party, I'll put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. But first, a quick word about one of my favorite sponsors, Magic Spoon. I am so hungry right now. Yay. Okay, so Magic Spoon. First up, huge news, new flavor announcement, cinnamon toast. And this stuff is so good. It reminds me of my very favorite cereal. And yeah, it might just maybe have surpassed maple waffle as my new favorite Magic Spoon cereal flavor. So good. Of course, the best part about Magic Spoon is, well, the stats, right? Each serving has 13 to 14 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. That is some seriously optimized cereal. But You know what I love even more than cinnamon toast and maple waffle and all of their other awesome Magic Spoon flavors? Yeah, their granola. I seriously am putting Magic Spoon granola into everything right now. Yogurt. We tried the peanut butter granola with chocolate ice cream a couple of nights ago. It was amazing. I even mix it in with just about every other cereal I eat right now, whether Magic Spoon or otherwise, like I've done here with the mixed berry and the cinnamon toast. It's actually a fantastic combo. It's just a great way to add a little heartiness, a little protein, because yeah, with the granola you get 13 grams of protein per serving and 0 added sugar. Ivy, come here. You gotta try this. Good, right?
Good. Yum.
That's my other cereal lover in the house. Anyways, then of course there's the treat bars, which I'm currently out of because I can't keep those things in stock in my house to save my life, especially with the kids at home from school for the summer. Anyways, they are a really great on-the-go option. 11 to 12 grams of protein, a single gram of sugar, only 1 to 2 net grams of carbs, light and yummy and satiating. So, if you haven't tried any or all of these great Magic Spoon products, do yourself a favor and see what you've been missing. Go to the link I've got in the pinned comment and video description, or scan the QR code that's been up on the screen the whole time so that they know I sent you. Thanks. Of course, as always, they offer a 100% happiness guarantee. If you order online and you don't like it, they'll refund your money, no questions asked, so you've got nothing to lose. Oh, and don't forget to use the code D4 at checkout to save $5 off your order of treats and or granola. All right. Big thanks to Magic Spoon for sponsoring and for helping me increase my protein and lower my carbs. Let's get back to the build. Okay, at level 1, for our starting class, we're just gonna start off Druid, why not? But I will say, consider starting Fighter, especially if you're only gonna play the character to like level 8 or 10. I know it's cliche, but Constitution saving throw proficiency for better concentration checks and a fighting style, among other things, are especially attractive here, but I'm not going to go that route for the build today. There are a lot of things in Druid that we want to get to ASAP, and another class as well. I guess I already kind of mentioned it at the very beginning, the Cleric, that's super important too. So we'll just suffer without Constitution saving throw for most of our career, I think, and do our best to make up for it. For our species, I'm going to say let's go Dragonborn today. But honestly, like, pick your favorite here, PYF. Now is the time to play that Triton or Water Genasi or Sea Elf that you have been wanting to build. So if you want to do that, go for it. The main reason I suggest Dragonborn is, as a multi-target damage dealing character here, I love having their breath weapon attack option. But I'm not actually going to be using that when I crunch numbers here, since I'm planning on going ham with spells like I've said. But if you want to have another AoE damage option, maybe so you can preserve your spell slots, maybe you're having more than one combat encounter per day regularly, right? Then yeah, Dragonborn is the go-to pick, I think. And I just say PYF for the ancestry here. Lightning or cold damage feels the most appropriate thematically, so blue, bronze, silver, or white, right? Since we're going for like a watery, stormy motif here. But if you want to go another route, go for it. For our background, as always, I'm going to say, take a custom one or an old one if you can, but if not, Sage should work just fine, as it gives both the origin feat we want and the right ability score increase options. As for that origin feat, I'm going to say, as I often do, grab Magic Initiate Wizard, not so that we can get a familiar. We're a druid. We've already got one.
He's already got one, you see?
What? He says they've already got one.
But it's so that we can get the shield spell from Magic Initiate Wizard, which is awesome for our defense, letting us use a reaction to increase our armor class by 5 for the rest of the round when we get hit, and also for the True Strike cantrip, which lets us make a weapon attack using our spellcasting stat. And yeah, we can decide that that is going to be Wisdom, even though we got it from Magic Initiate Wizard, right? It's a nice little change to the feat for 2024. Now, I'm not really planning on using that cantrip a ton in the build, and sure, we've got access to Shillelagh as a druid, so you might not need it, but if you don't want to worry about using a bonus action to cast Shillelagh when combat starts, right, but want to have a weapon attack option, well, there you go. For our starting abilities, I assume the point buy method as always and say let's start with a 15 Wisdom, take a +2 there, a 15 Constitution, and a +1 there, and then a 14 Dexterity. I think those are all fairly self-explanatory. And then for equipment, let's grab some scale mail armor, a shield, and then a trident. Yeah, It's my second build in a matter of weeks using a trident in all of the last almost 5 years I've been doing this. That's awesome. But again, honestly, I don't think we're going to be making a ton of weapon attacks. But I mean, come on, we're the masters of the Tempest here. We gotta have a trident, right? Feel free to go Warhammer, maybe if you're going for like a God of Thunder look instead, I guess. But anyways, yeah, scale mail and a martial weapon, because as a Druid 1, we get to choose our primal order, and I'd say let's be a Warden so that we can have medium armor and martial weapon proficiency. That's great for our armor class. We also learn Druidic here, which is that special language of twigs and leaves that Druids can learn to leave messages for one another. And then we get Druid spells. And there are lots of good ones to choose from here. For cantrips, I'd prioritize Guidance for a nice D4 to ability check utility, right? Maybe Shillelagh, if you didn't get True Strike especially, and definitely Thorn Whip, so that you can do damage to an enemy and potentially pull them 15 feet towards you. As a character focused on doing area of effect damage to multiple targets, sometimes the best thing that you can do with your action is to position an enemy in just the right spot so that you can hit them with your area of effect stuff, right? For first level spells, sure, grab Absorb Elements for some elemental damage resistance. That's nice. Heals are always good, right? And that's the great thing about being a Druid cleric like we will be, is you're going to have some great support capability if you want to focus on support once in a while instead of damage, right? So yeah, grab Cure Wounds or Healing Word or Good Berry or all three of them. But then I'd probably be concentrating on Entangle now, I think, to potentially restrain multiple enemies with our concentration. That's nice. And then Ice Knife makes a decent multi-target damage dealer early on. I guess Thunderclap is worth considering if you get surrounded by baddies too. Plus, you know, thunder. Gotta stick with the theme, people. Speaking of being surrounded by baddies, I want to give a shout out to my channel members and patrons. Ha! How's that for a segue? You guys are the best. Thank you so much for all that you do for me for this channel. I literally would have given up on the YouTube thing years ago if not for your support. Everybody else, I would love it if you'd consider becoming a channel member and or patron. You can see links in the video description on how to do so and what that entails. I give all of my perks to channel members and patrons as long as you sign up at just the silver level or higher. I just ask that you pay what you think it's worth and what you feel you can afford. And those perks include access to the library of write-ups that I do for all of my builds so that you can recreate it yourself a little more easily, right? Access to the community Discord server and access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that I do. And I've got one coming up in just a couple of days. I love those Q&As, they're so much fun. If you, though, are not interested in supporting the channel in this way or don't feel like you can afford it right now or whatever, that's totally fine. I'm glad that you're just here, and watching and liking and subscribing are all great ways to support the channel too, so thanks. Okay, at level 2, we get Wild Shape. This says that twice per day and recovering 1 use per short rest, we can use a bonus action to transform into a beast of 1/4 challenge rating or lower that doesn't have a fly speed. I'm not going to get too into the mechanics of this otherwise, since we will mostly be using our wild shape charges for something else, right? But this is a great feature to have for mostly utility, scouting, getting into otherwise hard to reach places, etc. We also get the Wild Companion feature, which, like I said, lets us have a familiar, just like the Find Familiar spell, if we spend a charge of Wild Shape to summon them, with the big differences being how quick you can do this, but then also they disappear when we finish a long rest, so that we would have to resummon them at the beginning of the day, right? It's a nice option to have, but not something that this build is going to rely on in any way. At level 3, we get our Druid subclass, of course, and we are, yes, going with Circle of the Sea. Let's read the flavor text that WotC has given us here, shall we? Become one with tides and storms. Druids of the Circle of the Sea draw on the tempestuous forces of oceans and storms, as some view themselves as embodiments of nature's wrath, seeking vengeance against those who despoil nature. Others seek mystical unity with nature by attuning themselves to the ebb and flow of the tides, following the rush of currents and waves and listening to the inscrutable whispers and roars of the winds. Ooh, that's among the better flavor text, I think, for a subclass that we get. It's very evocative. So, okay, as a Sea Druid, we get the Wrath of the Sea feature, and it's pretty great. It says that as a bonus action, we can spend a Wild Shape use to manifest a 5-foot emanation that looks like ocean spray, not the cranberries, but actual spray, and surrounds us for 10 minutes or until we are incapacitated. With that same bonus action, we used to summon it, and as a bonus action thereafter, we can choose a creature within the emanation and force them to make a Constitution saving throw or take cold damage equal to a number of d6s equal to our Wisdom modifier, so 3d6 for now, and then if they are large or smaller, be pushed up to 15 feet away from us. Okay, 3d6 damage as a bonus action is not bad. It scales up to, 5d6 eventually. It's pretty decent. I'm a little sour on the fact that in playtesting, the emanation started out at 10 feet, we will get there eventually, and didn't even require a bonus action to use after we first summoned it. We just got to do it for free at the end of our turn. Maybe that was too powerful, but considering that the enemy doesn't take half damage on a save, and it's a Constitution save, and we have to be in melee range to use it, right? I don't know. I feel like letting us just do it for free wasn't that overpowered. Of course, this is me that we're talking about. I don't think anything is overpowered, right? This is fine. I wish they would have at least let us keep the 10-foot emanation, but oh well, it's good. We do also get second level spells, right? And Sea Druids get a slew of solid, appropriately themed ones for free. Fog Cloud, Gust of Wind, Ray of Frost, Shatter, and Thunderwave, all for free. Some decent AoE options in there, among other things. On top of those spells, I'd look for the usual suspects. Aid to increase max hit points and heal 3 party members, right? Lesser Restoration to cure a bunch of nasty conditions. Pass Without Trace gives a flat 10 increase to your party stealth checks, etc. At level 4, we get our first general feat, and we are going to take Warcaster, and we're not even mad about it. Remember, Warcaster is a half feat now. That's awesome. Bumps our wisdom to 18, and then, lets us cast spells with our hands full, cast a spell as an opportunity attack, right, and best of all, gives us advantage on our concentration checks. Very cool. At level 5, we get Wild Resurgence, which lets us spend a spell slot to get a use of Wild Shape back, and lets us spend a use of Wild Shape to get a first level spell slot back once per day. Some much appreciated versatility there, but then we get third level spells too, and Sea Druids get Water Breathing for free, potentially useful, and then, dang, Lightning Bolt. Yeah, for a character intent on doing damage to multiple enemies every round, that's pretty fantastic. 8d6 damage in a 5-foot wide, 100-foot line is a lot of damage. Is the spell as good as Fireball? Probably not, but it depends on what you're fighting and where they're standing, right? And what else we're doing with our build. Check out Treant Monk's video here for a nice breakdown comparing the two that just might convince you that Lightning Bolt is potentially better than you might have thought. Aside from those free spells though, sure, consider Tidal Wave and Wall of Water for some water-themed spells that can be situationally pretty useful, but the one we want to focus on, of course, is Conjure Animals. This is going to take a minute. I've gone on record many times saying that the old 2014 version of Conjure Animals was my least favorite spell in the game. Didn't stop me from trying to build around it once, right? Up there. But, that spell was, I'm sorry, it was so annoying. If you're a fan, I apologize for offending you, but it just generally really slowed down gameplay, cluttered up the battlefield, and was really overpowered. Feel free to tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. I promise I won't agree with you. Anyways, I was a huge fan of the change to the spell in the 1D&D playtest, but they made a huge change to it for release from 1D&D, and again, it kind of soured me on the spell, so let's discuss. We cast it as an action. It requires concentration, and then conjures a large, so like 2x2 on a grid, right, pack of animals that we can flavor as we'd like. For sure, they've got to be electric eels or piranhas or baby sharks or something, right? Squids, snapping turtles, stingrays, little baby seals. Yeah, and then we could have called the build SEAL Team 6, as someone in the Discord suggested. While we are within 5 feet of this pack, we have advantage on strength saving throws. Feels a bit random, if I'm being honest. But then, this pack of animals sort of functions like spirit guardians. The first time the pack moves within 10 feet of a creature, so that's a pretty big area. They're already large, right? We get 10 feet on either side of them now, so it's like a 6x6 area, right? If the pack moves within 10 feet of a creature, and whenever a creature enters a space, that word is important, within 10 feet of the pack, or ends their turn in that space, then we can force the creature to make a dexterity saving throw, and if they fail, they take 3d10 slashing damage, scaling up by a d10 for every level we upcast the spell, though they cannot take this damage more than once per turn, meaning they could take it potentially multiple times per round, as long as it was on a different turn, right? One of the best things about the spell, though, is that we can move that pack on our turn just when we move. It doesn't require a bonus action or anything, we just have to move and then we can move them. And that's pretty powerful when the damage can potentially be done to enemies just when the spell area itself moves within 10 feet of a baddie, right? Okay, lots to discuss here. First up, in the 1D&D playtest, these animals actually made a spell attack against the enemy, and I kind of loved that. It was unique, and I mean, since especially, you can find ways to get advantage on your attacks, like if they got knocked prone or something, which I tried to build around with my Way of the Open Sea Monk Druid build way back when. It was nice. It could potentially make for some really reliable damage. But now they get to make a dexterity saving throw, and most damningly, unlike other spells with similar functionality, there's no half damage on a save. Ouch. To be fair, you can force the save just when the spell moves close to an enemy now, so you don't have to push them into it, right? And that's pretty nice. But still, I didn't love the changes, and they kind of made me not really want to do a build around the spell. But then I watched Chris's video on the spell up here. Man, I'm linking to just as many of Treant Monk's videos today as I am my own. What the crap? It's okay. He totally deserves it. And I learned something about a potential reading of the spell that I hadn't considered before. For those who missed it, let me break it down. The spell says, quote, whenever a creature you can see enters a space within 10 feet of the pack, you can potentially deal the damage. The argument here is that this means that, like, let's say on your turn, you moved the pack to within 5 feet of the creature and thus potentially damage them. Well, on the creature's turn, being within 5 feet of the pack, if they move to any square, if you're playing on a grid, then they are moving to a space that's within 10 feet of the pack, and thus you could make them save and potentially take damage again, since it can only be done once per turn but not once per round, right? Okay, so the question is this interpretation correct? Rules as written. Well, according to a poll that I did on the subject a couple of weeks ago, it is. For 80% or so of the over 2,000 at the time of this recording people who've responded. That's a decent sample size. Now, I can totally understand the argument against interpreting it this way. Maybe you just think it's cheesy or overpowered and that's not the intent of the designers, and so you don't rule it that way. Maybe you argue that in the spell description, the word space might not necessarily be referring to a 5-foot section on a grid, right? Not everyone plays on a grid after all. But instead, space is meant to refer to within 10 feet of the pack, right? And in that case, if you're starting within 10 feet of the pack, but then move so that you're still within 10 feet of the pack, well, you haven't moved into like that space, that within 10 feet of the pack space, right? And so you don't potentially take damage. It's only when you move to within 10 feet of them or end your turn there that you would take the damage. So how am I going to crunch the numbers? I feel like I got to go with the majority on this one, as I usually do. So yeah, I'm going to assume that we can fairly easily get targets to take damage from the spell twice in a round. I think that since there's no half damage on a save, and we're not making an attack anymore, so can't benefit from advantage and things, right? We're just forcing a saving throw, and dexterity isn't the best saving throw for us to be targeting, it's not too overpowered that we make this assumption. But yeah, I know that the numbers I present will be a little inflated, probably, if this isn't how the spell is interpreted at your table. Capiche? Right. At level 6, now that we've got our most important spells and our most important Sea Druid features, I think it's time for some multiclassing. There are some really potent ways we can improve our damage by doing so, but I think if we are going to, we should try to keep our multiclassing to full casters, since scaling our spell slots will be the best way for us to improve our damage. As a wisdom-based druid, then yeah, I think the easy and obvious choice for multiclassing here is cleric. But don't worry, just because we are getting a little more religious doesn't take anything away from our storm-focused selves, so bear with me. As a cleric 1, then, we get the new Divine Order feature first up, and I'd say let's grab the Thaumaturge option, so we can learn an extra cleric cantrip and add our wisdom bonus to our Arcana or Religion checks. You could go the Protector route for heavy armor proficiency, but we'll discuss that in a sec. We also get cleric spells here, and I just say to focus on utility, ritual, and like spells that you didn't get from druid, right? Unless you want to take, say, healing word as a cleric and then swap out a first level druid spell instead, of course. But yeah, Toll the Dead can potentially be a hard-hitting cantrip. Word of Radiance gives another little emanation AoE option. But stuff like Detect Magic or Poison can be useful. Sanctuary can do nice things to protect a squishy ally, or even yourself if you don't mind the restrictions. At level 6, then, it is time for our first damage report. So let's discuss what I think combat would ideally look like for us here. On round 1, you would be casting Conjure Animals with your action, using your bonus action to get your Wrath of the Sea going. Try and do damage to one enemy within that small emanation area, ideally pushing them so that they enter the Conjure Animal space, right? And then moving yourself so you can move the animals around the battlefield up to 30 feet, trying to hit as many enemies with it as you can. The question is this: how many enemies do I assume that we can hit with Conjure Animals? Maybe more importantly, how many enemies do I assume I can both get within 10 feet and end the pack's movement so that those enemies are guaranteed to take damage on their turn, because when they move, they'll be so close that they potentially, just move within 10 feet of it still, right? This is, of course, impossible for me to know and will vary from fight to fight. Sometimes you will be better off just moving the conjured animals in a way that you hit a bunch of enemies, right? Maybe there are 4 or 5 that you can get, though it might mean ending the movement so that it's going to do double damage to only one of them. I just don't know. To make it easy on myself for math purposes, I'm going to assume that we will either be doing like double damage to 2 enemies with Conjure Animals, or just hitting 4 enemies with it one time. So maybe if you don't interpret it at your table as being able to so easily do double damage to a target, right? Well, you can probably move the spell so that you can just get more enemies with it, assuming there's the enemies to get. Anyways, of course, the numbers are going to fluctuate a lot based on your battlefield, based on your table. Making the assumption that I do is potentially too conservative, but I don't mind erring on the side of caution here. Okay, since I calculate numbers averaged over a 4-round combat encounter, what do we do with our actions on rounds 2 through 4? Well, thanks to multiclassing, we have 2 third-level spell slots left. So yeah, sure, let's throw out a lightning bolt. Why not? Even though its area is a line instead of a sphere, surely we could get 2 enemies in the blast pretty regularly, right? That feels like a fairly conservative assumption. On round 4, of course, we wouldn't have a spell slot for Lightning Bolt, so let's just go with like a 2nd level Shatter or Thunder Wave. That would be 3d8. Okay, you might notice that all of these things we are doing for damage require saving throws. Do I try to show different damage amounts based on enemy saving throws? I could. But the fluctuation at the CRs we're likely to be fighting here are a relatively narrow band. They basically fluctuate between -1 to a save and +7 for Dex and Con at least. And if I just take the average for CR6 anyways, we end up with about a 50% chance that the enemy succeeds on their save. So for the ease of math, I'm just going to assume that enemies have a 50% chance to make their saves against everything that we're trying to do. Obviously, these numbers will fluctuate a bit depending on what you're fighting, but they're never going to be way off, I don't think. Altogether then, when we're firing on all cylinders, we will be hitting 1 target for 4d6 with our bonus action, right? The Ocean Spray, and then 2 targets for 6d10 per round from Conjure Animals, or 4 targets for 3d10 each, I guess. And then 8d6 from Lightning Bolt on 2, I'm assuming. So, averaging all of that over 4 rounds against 2 enemies, assuming a 50% chance to save, the total damage we would do against 2 targets would be 66 damage per round on average. And, okay, compared to other sustained AoE builds that I've done to date, that's better than anything that I've ever done, both for total damage and for damage per enemy. And I mean, a lot of our damage is save or suck, right? If we could get half damage on a save on everything that we were doing, especially Conjure Animals, and not just from Lightning Bolt and Shatter, these numbers would be a whole lot higher. So yeah, maybe it's okay if Wrath of the Sea and Conjure Animals do 0 damage on a successful save. But of course, yes, massive grain of salt here. We've just blown all of our best resources on a single round of combat. You might not want to do that. You might be using Conjure Animals and then on subsequent rounds just making a True Strike attack against an enemy, or perhaps casting Acid Splash or Toll the Dead or Poison Spray, right? And yeah, your average damage in that case would be way lower. So adjust accordingly if need be, but I think it's pretty fun to figure out what we're capable of if we need to pull out all the stops. 66 total damage in a round is a lot of damage for a level 6 character, and of course, we very well might have rounds where we're hitting more enemies than I'm assuming, so yeah, that's awesome. Let's see where we can take it from here, shall we? At level 7, we would be a Cleric 2, and that means we get Channel Divinity. Like Wild Shape, we get 2 uses of Channel Divinity per long rest now, recovering 1 use on a short rest. We can use Channel Divinity for a couple of things initially. Divine Spark lets us use an action to heal or harm with a Constitution save, half damage on a save, a creature we can see within 30 feet of us for just 1d8 plus our Wisdom modifier. Hard to imagine using this option all that often once we hit Cleric 3 anyways, but hey, it's there if you need it. We can also use Channel Divinity to turn undead, of course, letting us take an action to force every undead within 30 feet to make a Wisdom save or be frightened and incapacitated and be forced to flee from you. I hope you get to fight lots of undead in your campaign. Don't forget, thanks to multiclassing, we do now have 4th level spell slots if we want to be upcasting Conjure Animals, among other things. At level 8, we would be a Cleric 3, and that means that we get our Cleric subclass. Now we gotta wait all the way until 3 to get our domain, and I mean, how do we not go with Tempest Domain on this build, right? Come on, Masters of the Sea and the Storm? It would feel like morally and ethically wrong to go any other route, I think. That said, maybe you can't play with older content at your table. Or maybe you just don't want to be a Tempest Cleric. I can see an argument for Light Cleric. They make really good AoE blasters themselves, as I think I showed to great effect with this oldie but goodie up here. And, you know, having Fireball and Lightning Bolt both would be fun. Death Cleric would also be a great choice if you wanted to stick with the multi-target theme, but wanted to conserve your spell slots a little bit more so that you could potentially do damage to 2 targets with your Necromancy cantrips. Now, Tempest hasn't been updated for 2024 yet, I hope, meaning that when we take it now, at level 3, we get all the features that you used to get from Tempest at Cleric levels 1 and 2, right? First up, we get Heavy Armor Proficiency. This is one reason why I didn't want to go with the Protector option for our Divine Order, but to be fair, we might not want to wear heavy armor regardless, since wearing plate with our low strength score would reduce our speed by 10 feet. It's nice to have the option in case you find a set of mithril plate, or maybe you're always mounted for some reason, etc. We also get Wrath of the Storm here, which says that Wisdom modifier times per day, when a creature within 5 feet of us hits us with an attack, we can use our reaction to force a dexterity save or deal 2d8 of lightning or thunder damage, half on a save. It's not a ton, but if we're not using our reaction otherwise, sure. The real reason we are here, of course, is for that wonderful Destructive Wrath feature, which says that when we roll lightning or thunder damage, we can use our Channel Divinity to deal maximum damage instead of rolling. And thankfully, Lightning Bolt still does half damage on a save, so buffing it is pretty fantastic, especially if you can be hitting multiple targets with it. As for second level Cleric spells, Tempest Clerics get Fog Cloud, Thunderwave, Gust of Wind, and Shatter for free, all of which we already had for free from Sea Druid. Maybe there's too much synergy between these subclasses, huh? That's fine. There are other good choices here that druids couldn't get. Maybe Augury, Blindness, Deafness, Silence, Zone of Truth, and of course, the best tank spell in the game if you want to help protect a squishy ally, Warding Bond. At level 9, we'd be a Cleric 4, and that means we get another feat. I'm just going to bump Wisdom here, take it to 20, cap it, right? This is so very important for pretty much everything that we're trying to do. And remember, thanks to multiclassing, we now have a 5th level spell slot, just in time for our next damage report. Since last check, we've increased our spell slot so that we could potentially be upcasting Conjure Animals to 5th level, right? So it would deal 5d10 damage, that's nice. And even giving us 3 4th level spell slots for Lightning Bolt if we were so crazy as to just blow all of our best spell slots for damage. We also picked up 2 uses of Destructive Wrath to potentially max out the damage on those Lightning Bolts a couple of times, plus capped our Wisdom for a better spell DC and a bit more damage on our Wrath of the Sea bonus action, right? Plus picked up some nice support, utility, and even defensive options. For the record, I'm just going to continue to assume that enemies have a 50% chance to save against everything we're doing. And so, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter against 2 targets, we would potentially be doing 116 DPR here on average. And I mean, that's a lot of damage. It's, again, more total damage to multiple targets than any 2024 build I've done to date. But I guess I should throw out a caveat here. At the time that I did my Cleric of Chaos build, that's what the thumb looks like, I was actually calculating for like a variety of enemy saving throws, right? From +0 all the way up to +15. On the one hand, yeah, it's nice to see where we'd be at if the enemy had a +0 to save versus like a +5, right? But in an attempt to compare those saving throw builds to builds that targeted enemy armor class instead, I would, calculate for a saving throw bonus from +0 to +15 to coincide with the enemy ACs of 10 to 25, right? You have then like 16 points of data to compare to, regardless of whether you're targeting AC or saving throws. The problem with that is, while running into an enemy of AC 25 is super rare, maybe especially at lower levels, even in those hypothetical situations, you could still hit a very high AC by rolling a natural 20, right? And getting a critical. And also, bonuses to save just don't really correlate with enemy AC that well on average. I mean, okay, we're level 9. Looking at CR9 monsters in the new monster manual, the average armor class is 17, but the average saving throw bonus is +3. It's a little higher than that if we're just looking at dexterity and constitution saves, but not by much. So trying to say that one build that targets AC is better or worse than a build that targets saving throws when comparing like 17 AC to a +7 saving throw, it's not a very good or useful comparison. Does that make sense? I think then it's actually a bit more fair to just assume a 50% save chance, knowing of course that numbers could potentially swing quite a bit in either direction depending on what you're fighting. It makes for a slightly better way to compare these builds to each other, I think, and that's kind of what I'm more interested in at the end of the day. And so, for the record, I'm updating the numbers on the comparison spreadsheet for the Cleric of Chaos build, if you're interested. I always link to these spreadsheets in the video description, right? And yeah, we are still outperforming that Cleric of Chaos for total damage on average, even though they were hitting 3 enemies with Spirit Guardians twice per round. So we're doing a lot more damage and a lot more damage per enemy, and that is impressive. Yeah, we're burning all our spell slots to do it, but it's good to know that even if we wanted to scale things back a bit to try and conserve resources so we could keep pumping our damage, or heaven forbid, use our spell slots to like heal or control, this is the worst Cleric Druid build ever. The support fans are screaming. Then yeah, we could, and still put out some super solid DPR. Okay, cool. Let's see where we go from here. At level 10, I think I'd like to stay Cleric for a little bit longer because there's some good stuff on the horizon for us. At Cleric 5, then, we would get the new Seer Undead that's replaced Destroy Undead, right? And I like this a lot more. It says that when you use Turn Undead, everyone that fails their save against it also takes radiant damage equal to our Wisdom modifier number of d8s. A nice way to like soften up those bad guys for when the turning of them wears off. We also get 3rd level cleric spells. Tempest clerics get Call Lightning and Sleet Storm for free, situationally fairly useful and very on point thematically, though I can't imagine using concentration on Call Lightning, honestly. Aside from that, I'd grab Revivify in case someone dies. Dispel Magic is always useful. Aura of Vitality is a fantastic and efficient healing spell, maybe especially useful outside of combat. Daylight is always good to have if you need it. Mass Healing Word in case multiple allies go down, right? Lots of good ones, choose wisely. At level 11, we would be a Cleric 6, and as a Tempest Cleric, we get Thunderbolt Strike, which is really just super good for us, and super fun. It says when we deal lightning damage to a large or smaller creature, we can also push it up to 10 feet away from us. No saving throw on this one, and Lightning Bolt always deals at least some damage, unless they have immunity or like evasion, I guess. So it's a nice way to guarantee some repositioning on an enemy or 3 if we need to, especially if the Wrath of the Sea push doesn't work, right? We also get a 3rd use of Channel Divinity per day, meaning, yeah, we could max out every single casting of Lightning Bolt in our 4-round combat encounter, and that's pretty incredible. Don't forget, with multiclassing, we now have a 6th level spell slot. At level 12, with Thunderbolt, Strike, and another Channel Divinity use under our belts, I think I go back to Druid. You don't have to. There's good stuff in Cleric, but I think Druids have the better spell list, personally, and I like the Sea Druid benefits too. So as a Druid 6, then we get the Aquatic Affinity feature as a Sea Druid, which increases the size of our Wrath of the Sea emanation to 10 feet, finally. Might have wanted to get here before taking Cleric levels, honestly. And also gives us a swim speed equal to our speed. Hopefully that's useful for you at some point. At level 13, we would be a Druid 7, and that means the new Elemental Fury feature, which lets us pick from like 2 different buffs. Potent Spellcasting is the one I would pick, I think, since it lets us add our Wisdom modifier to the damage that we deal with any Druid cantrip. It's not bad. You know, maybe you're trying to save spell slots, or you're focusing on single target damage, or maybe you're repositioning an enemy with Thorn Whip, etc., right? The other option here, Primal Strike, says that when we hit with a weapon attack or when in wild shape, we can add a d8 of damage. So maybe if you're using like True Strike or Shillelagh, that would be a better route to go. True Strike isn't a Druid cantrip, so it wouldn't benefit from potent spellcasting, right? Feel free to go either way if you want. We also get 4th level Druid spells here. Sea Druids get Control Water and Ice Storm for free, on point thematically and situationally useful. Beyond that, sure, Polymorph is always great. Turn yourself into a shark and turn your friend into a shark. And then summon a pack of sharks. There's Wall of Fire, Watery Sphere, has water in the name of the spell, and actually can be a decent control option too, for sure. Don't forget, we do have a 7th level spell slot now thanks to multiclassing, and that brings us to our next damage report. Since last check, we've increased the damage we could be doing with Conjure Animals to 7d10, nice, and added 1 6th and 2 5th level spell slots for Lightning Bolt. Were we so foolish as to use them for that? And even a 3rd Channel Divinity to max out those Lightning Bolts. Maybe not so foolish after all if they're doing max damage, right? As always, we've also gained some nice support, utility, and control options to boot. But over 4 rounds against 2 enemies, assuming a 50% chance to save, we would on average do 156 DPR per round. And yeah, we're still staying ahead of all multi-target damage dealers to date, both in total damage and in damage per target, which is pretty amazing. Though, as always, yes, with a pretty hefty price tag attached. Okay, let's see what it looks like coming down the home stretch. At level 14, we would be a Druid 8. That means we get another feat. And I think I'd probably either grab Resilient Constitution to give an even bigger bump to Constitution saves, concentration checks, or potentially Elemental Adept so we could ignore lightning resistance. I don't love that latter option though, if I'm being honest. For one, it would make me feel like I was largely wasting the half feat. You get to bump wisdom potentially there. I mean, you know, we could have taken this last time we got a feat and then take it a different half feat now to get our wisdom to 20. But, you know, lightning resistance isn't all that common, and this doesn't do anything for lightning immunity. And we could always just choose to use our spell slots for something else if we run into lightning resistance or immunity anyways. But it's not a terrible choice. The only thing that would bum me out about Resilient Constitution is having an odd Constitution modifier here. I mean, I guess we could have planned ahead for that, right? Or sure, maybe we take another half Constitution feat the next time we get one, if we're gonna play to level 18 or beyond anyways. At level 15, we would be a Druid 9, and that means 5th level Druid spells. Sea Druids get Conjure Elemental and Hold Monster for free, very solid spells if you'd rather concentrate on something else. But then I'd probably grab Greater Restoration for an even better cure-all. Maelstrom is definitely on point thematically, and it's in our name after all. And then, speaking of alternatives to Lightning Bolt, if you need it, I guess Cone of Cold isn't bad. We'd have 8th level spell slots now, right? And Upcast at, say, like a 7th level spell, Lightning Bolt does 42 damage on average, whereas Cone of Cold would do 45. Plus, you know, the 60-foot cone area of Cone of Cold might be more likely to get more enemies in its area of effect than the Lightning Bolt line, right? Granted, you can't max damage Cone of Cold with Destructive Wrath, but if we're casting this because the enemy is resistant to lightning, then, you know, moot point, right? Or maybe if we think we can get a couple more enemies with it, could be worth it. Anyways, don't forget we get an 8th level spell slot now thanks to multiclassing. At level 16, we would be a Druid 10, and Sea Druids get the Stormborn feature, which says that while we've got Wrath of the Sea active, We can just straight up fly and have resistance to cold, lightning, and thunder damage. Some pretty grade A passive benefits right there. But then finally for us, at level 17, we would be a Druid 11, and that means we get 6th level Druid spells, and I'm just going to say PYF here, though there are some great ones to choose from. Heal is about as good as it gets for a massive big heal with a single action in case of emergency, right? Hero's Feast, though, is one of the best buffs in the game if you've got time to sit down and eat a while. Sunbeam is a great area of effect in a line, damage dealer, and blinder, right? It blinds enemies potentially. It's less damage than lightning bolt, but blinding a bunch of enemies might be worth it, especially since the light is sunlight, so good for vampires. Oh, and I mean, transport via plants might be my favorite utility spell in the game. I don't know. There's just something awesome about walking into a tree and then walking out of a tree anywhere else in the world. So handy when you need to travel. Don't forget, 9th level spell slot now, thanks to multiclassing. So, at level 17, for our final damage report, we've picked up a ton of utility, support, and buffing, control, and even different damage options. But the only thing we've really done to increase the numbers of our main tactic in combat is to increase our spell slots. Yes, all the way to 9th level. Meaning our Conjure Animals could potentially be doing 9d10 damage every time it works, with 3 max damage lightning bolts hitting for 78, 72, and 66 damage respectively to every target they hit. That's silly. So, over 4 rounds, assuming 2 targets that make their saving throw 50% of the time, on average we would do 189 damage per round. And that actually, for the first time, isn't beating the previous multi-target damage dealer leader, right? The Cleric of Chaos, on average. But it's tied with it for total damage and doing a lot more damage per enemy since I'm only calculating for 2 targets here and that build was calculating for 3. So let's go over some final thoughts here, shall we? The tier score for the build, if we just take the damage that they do at each of the 4 damage reports and average it into one number, we end up with a 131, meaning we've got a new frontrunner for multi-target damage, and that's fun. But what does it all mean? Right, so sure, this build is spending everything in a single combat encounter to hit these numbers. For a lot of you, on a lot of adventuring days, your results will not be this good. The Cleric of Chaos was only using a single spell slot to put out that kind of damage, or close to it anyways, right? And all they were doing with their action was just readying it so that they could move on their turn and hit everyone with Spirit Guardians a second time with their reaction. But that's kind of the rub, right? That build was using fewer resources, but they were using their action every round to just run around some more. In combat, were they that much more useful? Sure, they potentially had more spell slots to like heal or buff or other things, but then they wouldn't have been doing as much damage. And that's the same thing for this build, right? And Cleric of Chaos, I was always assuming that they were using their highest spell slot for Spirit Guardians, so if there was a second combat encounter, depending on the level, you know, their damage wouldn't have been as good. Like I often say, you can make these little, like, this build isn't really gonna perform this well all the time arguments for just about all of my builds, and I am 100% okay with that, as long as we're holding every build to the same admittedly low standard, you know? But yeah, if I became confident that most tables were having 4 combat encounters a day on average, I probably would change up what I consider sustainable damage, and I can guarantee you that in that scenario, the average damage from spell users would come down dramatically when compared to martials. Heck, there might even be a martial build or 2 out there that could keep up, or heaven forbid, surpass a spellcaster who was built for damage on the DPR spreadsheets, at least for like 1 or 2 of the combat encounters when the caster's spell slots were running low. So here's my probably not so hot take. Maybe the huge power gap between casters and martials is less the fault of Wizards of the Coast and more the fault of those of us who aren't running enough combat encounters in a day, huh? Now, I know, before you get all huffy, the true power from spells isn't in the damage they do, but in other stuff, most notably perhaps the control. I get it. So yeah, I'd argue that Wizards of the Coast does still need to do more to close that martial caster divide, and I think they should start by improving the damage scaling that martials get, especially in tier 3 and tier 4, but that is all a little bit beside the point. The point, my friends, is this. This build is awesome. My original Master of the Storm build was great. That Storm Sorcerer Tempest Cleric, right? There's the thumbnail. But Sea Druid Tempest Cleric makes a way better Storm Master than Storm Sorcerer Tempest Cleric did. Come on, the ocean spray whirling about you, tearing up the battlefield with your roving pack of piranhas, tossing enemies to and fro and blasting multiple baddies with some insanely powerful lightning blasts. It's enough to make Poseidon himself green with envy, not to mention the amazing support you could bring if you wanted and when you needed, right? I mean, we are a full druid cleric. Even if we never get to 9th level spells, we've got more than enough to keep our party in the fight and patch them up in between if need be, if we wanted to sacrifice some damage, and I love that versatility. And so I think will you. So that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I really had a lot of fun and was pleasantly surprised, as I so often am, surprisingly, once I get these builds put together, at how effective this was, right? Despite my misgivings. So anyways, I love you guys. You are the best. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for this channel. I so appreciate you. I hope you have a fantastic day and a great week. And if you don't, I really hope that you will not give up. Please hang in there. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other one had to say. Reminiscing this and that and having such a good time. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. Never ever dreaming there was danger in the water they were drinking, they just guzzled it down. Never dreaming that a scheming sheriff and his posse was a-watching them and gathering around. Robin Hood and Little John running through the forest, jumping fences, dodging trees and trying to get away. Contemplating nothing but escaping, finally making it. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. Oh man, do I love me some classic Robin Hood. I had to sing that song because I'm wearing my Robin Hood t-shirt, though I think a lot of people don't necessarily recognize it as such. But happy Father's Day. This is like my favorite, like, dad, yay dad, t-shirt, and Father's Day is coming up, so it felt like the right time. So happy Father's Day to all of you fathers out there, and to all of those of you who have fathers, which is everybody. It's not quite straight. Brew Doctor on sale at my local grocery store for $2. What a deal. Even if you get... All right. Where was I? Drink. On round 1. Throw out and then the average